The good news about the indie bookstores in America, as we were talking about yesterday, is that there is a resurgence in stores. There's a bunch of reasons for all of that, and that we're getting, it's a story that is beginning to get told in the media. We get a fair amount of national press coverage because it's a story that runs contrary to the kind of, everybody assumes that the big guy is going to beat the little guy, and it's only big is going to work. So that when we have this contrary story, it has for sure gained lots of people's attention. I mean, we have, I talked a little bit yesterday about this professor at Harvard Business School, Professor Raffaele, who has spent the last 5 years doing this incredibly in-depth analysis of the American book business, specifically the American.
With ABA?
Well, we've worked with him, though you need to understand that Harvard, they're very pristine. What they do, they're not. They draw their own conclusions. Raffaele has, he has developed this expertise in industries that have reinvented themselves. And his first major work was all about the Swiss watch industry. The Swiss watch industry was all about done, and over the last 15 years has been totally re-energized. And he thought, he started that hypothesis about independent bookstores, that the mall stores in America, the big box stores, the internet, e-reading, that was going to all wipe out indie stores. There'd be no reason for them to exist anymore. And his very in-depth analysis says quite the opposite, and that in fact there is a thriving indie book market that is growing. So his full report is going to be published in the Harvard Business Review at the very end of 2019. And then I think he's hopefully he'll write, there'll be a book about it that will follow. He's going to present his findings in full. There have been pieces of it that have been public, but he's going to provide his thing at our event next January in 2019. So the thing about American booksellers is they're all different. Every store is different, and that's in fact what it is about our members that makes them interesting and attractive, is they're not the same. Every store looks different, has a different feel, they carry a different kind of number of books. They're all different, and it's one of the challenges as an association, because we're trying, it's kind of a challenge in a branding sense, because what we're branding is that they're different, and that is not easy to do. But as you can see, every store is different, has a very different look and feel. And that's part of their success. There's some very absolutely magnificent, beautiful stores. There are other stores that kind of just look like places people want to shop. They're all every store literally is different. This is of course City Lights in San Francisco, which is one of the oldest independent bookstores in America. The store that was founded by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the poet, and the kind of place where all the beat poets were in the 1950s. I was there about a month ago. It is Ferlinghetti's 100th birthday. And literally outside the street, outside the store, there were thousands of people gathered to celebrate his career and his life in an indie bookstore. So our membership numbers have shown that modest growth. ABA members are in our association. It is the company that is the member, and many of those companies operate in more than one location. So currently we have about a little over 1,850 member companies. that do business in about 2,500 locations across the United States. And the good news is you can see that graph shows not big growth, but very slow, steady growth over a period of years. If I showed you that chart for the 10 years before, from 2000 to 1999, it would have been the reverse. It would have been, the numbers would have gone the other way. There is also, some modest increase in the sales across our members. We have a partnership with an American company called BookScan. BookScan was, for a while, it started as a separate business, then got purchased by Nielsen, was now purchased by a company called NPD, which is the largest consumer data collector, certainly in America, I think probably around the world. And we have about 550 of our members report every week electronically to NPD. And what we collect are unit sales by ISBN. We don't know what they sell them for. We don't collect dollars, but we collect units. So this reflects the increase in the number of books, anything with an ISBN number over our stores. It was about a 5% increase in 18 over 17, about a 7.5 compound increase over the last 5 years. And when you compare that to sales overall in the business, as I said earlier, our modest piece of the pie is the healthier piece of the pie. The rest of the business is either like this or having slight decline. Ours is going up. But it's a very tough business. No one's getting rich. That's positive net income. Obviously, the good news for us is that it's positive now, and the trend is in the right direction. But you get a sense of how tough and fragile it is to own and operate an indie bookshop in the United States. We do. This is based on an annual benchmarking study that we do, a rather in-depth analysis of our members' business operations. That's the average net income. There are about a third of our members doing appreciably better than that are delivering about 8% to the bottom line, which in retail in America is as good as it gets. But there are also obviously a fairly substantial number that are on the negative side. We think the trend is okay, but it just reveals that it is it's a tough business. In 2018, the growth in the business was on the adult nonfiction side. The kids piece of the business has remained relatively strong. That compounded annual growth rate, 3%. The 5% on adult nonfiction last year, that was heavily driven by a bunch of a few specific nonfiction titles, a bunch of political books last year that did particularly well in the American market. But it is, that is based on aggregate NPD data. And then, as I was saying earlier, there is some indication about how the ebook piece of the business is, after its peak in 2013, has been showing some modest decrease. My guess is that my friend Mr. Shatskin would probably not use this slide in his presentation, but again, that's NPD data. It's not my data, and I think it's pretty obvious that trend now is going to continue. Now, look, I mean, it's still, at $160 billion, it still represents a sizable business. I'm not suggesting that it's irrelevant by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that obviously reflects some of the digital fatigue that we were talking about and the somewhat changing attitudes. And I certainly, that will, I think, probably at some point level off. I don't think it's going to keep going down. So far the data I've seen for 2019 shows, again, very modest decrease. Now, in fairness, do we really know what's going to happen a decade from now, a generation from now? Does this trend get reversed? I suppose that's possible, but certainly we've now got a chunk of years where it's obviously been different.
Now, what about the self-publishing sales? Vale, listo.
We would prefer to have your
okay. Then
presentation all together and then
absolutely. The American Booksellers Association is engaged in a whole series of efforts to try to help our member stores be more competitive. We are a not-for-profit trade association that exists for one reason, and that is to help our member stores be more successful and be more profitable. That really is the only reason for us to exist. One of the things that indie bookstores have always done incredibly well is to recommend titles. We publish a whole lot of books in the United States every year, and in order to be able to curate that content, if you will, to be able to select books, our members recommend books, and we publish a monthly list of recommended titles recommended by indie booksellers across the country. Those are blurbs from booksellers. In fact, the #1 book is an election. That is the book that gets nominated most often by indie bookstores. This list we distribute about 750,000 copies of it in print, and are now distributing almost 1 million. We're sending this electronically to about 1 million consumers every month. It's designed, obviously, to be to be able to reflect the knowledge and passion of indie booksellers on specific titles, but more broadly to reflect the fact that our member stores know about the books, which is at the end one of the things that has always differentiated ourselves from our competitors. That anybody can sell a book. What we're selling is that knowledge and passion about the book that helps create our experience and makes it a little different. We do that data that we collect from those a little less than 600 outlets every week is used to create a bestseller list. Indie bookstore customers always like lists. We weekly publish a bestseller list, and our list, interestingly, every given week is different from the New York Times list, from the Wall Street Journal list, from USA Today, because it is reflecting what's being sold across the network of stores. And that is different. It is not necessarily in units the biggest selling titles, but what this list reflects is the diversity of stores of what is being sold across the network of our members. We have a program in which we aggregate galleys, advanced reading copies for publishers that we then disseminate to stores so that booksellers get a monthly box with a lot of all that material in the same place. We have a whole series of other programs in which we help publishers put their titles in front of consumers. This is what we call advance access, so that booksellers can get galleys, get books digitally for new titles in the hope that they will become titles they'll be interested in. We're very committed to help showcase new debut authors, first-time authors. We have this program called Industries Introduced, in which we have a panel of booksellers reading literally dozens and dozens of debut books and selecting the ones in which they think will be appealing to our member stores. So we publish a list of what we call Indies Introduced. We operate websites for about 450 of our members. We're the back end. That, as you can see, this is East City Bookshop. This is a new store in Washington, D.C. That's their homepage. So the homepage is them with their events and things, but we are the back end of that website. And it's basically an effort to try to create some economy of scale, that we can do this on behalf of larger stores far less expensively than what it would cost individual stores to be able to do. And online sales still reflect a relatively modest piece of the total sales in our member stores, but it's growing. Last year, the stores that use this indie commerce platform had about a 10% growth in sales. It's still, for most of our member stores, their online sales will be 5% or less of their total sales. 5%. 5, yeah. So it's a small piece of their overall sales, but the web in 2019 is the 21st century version of the telephone and the yellow pages, that you can't operate your business without it. People go to the web to find out what hours you're open, to find out what's going on at the store, and it is just an indispensable part of how you operate a retail business. ABA is firmly committed to being in what we call the education business, of helping train our members. And I say with some modesty, I think one of the other ingredients in the growth and success of our members in these recent years has been that our members are just better educated. They understand the business a lot better today than they did a decade ago. Now, some of that I think is just inevitable, that you've got to be a better, smarter business person, that given the competitive environment that we're in. At ABA, we've been operating this Winter Institute. We did our 14th version of it in Albuquerque this past January. We are doing our 15th incarnation of it in 2020 in Baltimore. We move it around the country. It is a 4-day intense educational workshop in which people are learning about every operational issue, about how it is you can operate a more successful, profitable store. We cap the attendance at our institute to about 700 people, from maximum of 3 per store. We end up selling it out and have a wait list of people wanting to get in, which helps, I think, reflect that there is this demand for people to want to understand and learn how to operate their business. We do a kids version of it, focused on kids books. It's coming up in a few weeks in Pittsburgh. Next year, as I said, will be the 15th anniversary of our Winter Institute. Also is the 120th anniversary of ABA. ABA was, let's remember that easily, because ABA was founded in 1900, so we'll be celebrating our 120th year. And education is both about the sharing between, we work really hard at creating what we think is a pretty exciting program, but it's when you put all the booksellers under one roof and they can share best practices with each other. That is at the heart of what Professor Raffaelli at Harvard discovered about our business, which is significantly different from other retail channels, because this sense of community between indie booksellers across America is very, very strong. People are willing to share what works in their store. And even though in theory people are competitors, they don't look at each other as competitors, they look at each other as colleagues. And there is an incredibly powerful cooperative environment that certainly is the way our stores and our members operate. And one of the things we've had to learn now is that a lot of that education that we do physically in a place, that in the reality of the current world, you've got to make available remotely, and you've got to make it available through webinars and digitally. We now record everything that we do, so bookstores can have access to all this voluminous educational material back in their store. You know, we're delighted when people want to come to an event, but practically, it's a big country. Travel is expensive, and taking that content and making it available remotely is important to us. ABA is committed to helping do promotional programs. There's the traditional kickoff to our holiday selling season around Thanksgiving every year and at the end of November. And for years, the big box stores kind of coined this day that they call Black Friday, which is the day after Thanksgiving, in which, you know, Walmart and Target and everybody opens at, midnight, and they sell, TVs for $25 for the first 50 people who want to be there at 2 o'clock in the morning. And it's this big retail frenzy. American Express, to their enormous credit, and obviously they had some other motivations for why they wanted to do this, created on that next day what they now call Small Business Saturday, which has become huge. And this Indies First is our way of participating in Small Business Saturday. Literally, for our members, that Saturday is probably the biggest sales day of the year, with the exception of the 1 or 2 days before Christmas. And it is this big national celebration of locally owned independent business, not just bookstores, but everything, and it has become enormously success. American Express, of course, their motivation was all about encouraging small businesses to take American Express cards, but they spend literally tens of millions of dollars in national advertising, encouraging people to go shop in locally owned independent businesses that day. It's pretty extraordinary. We also have created in April something we call Independent Bookstore Day, something in fact we borrowed from our friends in Australia who have been doing that for many years. We have a day in April in which we just celebrate independent stores, and we have hundreds and hundreds of stores doing events. Gives us an opportunity to talk to the media about what's going on in member stores. All this good stuff that's happening in our membership, and certainly the local movement, the desire by millions of American consumers to want to shop in locally owned independent businesses, has become and continues to be huge. But it would be disingenuous in talking about our business without acknowledging the role of Amazon. Amazon is the 1,000-pound gorilla. It affects everything. Not only, obviously, are they this massive retailer, but their influence in every other form of entertainment, their influence in cloud computing. It's difficult to overstate the tentacles that Amazon has into every facet of the American economy. And, ABA is committed to help our members differentiate themselves in the marketplace and to be able to tell the story to their customers as to why you should shop in our store, because we're good at what we do. We're offering something of value to the community. But it's kind of disingenuous to have that conversation without acknowledging there is an elephant in the room, and there is this massive competitor in Amazon. And Amazon has, as I say, just radically affected the retail economy. We've done this work with this company called Civic Economics, which is this outside economic forecasting firm in Chicago that has looked at Amazon's activities. And this is pretty conservative data about the numbers of retail stores in America that have been put out of business because of Amazon. 62,000 stores in the United States in 2018, a little less than 1 million jobs lost to the retail economy. a staggering amount of money, of sales tax that's uncollected. We don't have a national sales tax in the United States. Sales tax is all adjudicated by state and local governments, but guesstimating what it is that's lost is a complicated exercise, but we have done this now in some depth, and somewhere between $5.5 and $7 billion of lost revenue to state and local government. I mean, so Amazon, is the 1,000-pound gorilla, and we're very committed to help our members differentiate themselves in the marketplace, to focus on the positive attributes of who they are and what they do. We think it's also important to understand that we've got a competitor who is distorting a whole lot of the business, and that just shows you, just by level of seriousness of the cumulative uncollected sales tax by state, and how significant that money would be for state and local government. I would say that without simplifying it, is that our growth and success is because our members are better business people today. They have succeeded in differentiating themselves in the marketplace. The business is fiercely, fiercely competitive. Books are being sold everywhere, in supermarkets and drugstores and mass merchandisers, of course online. It's a fiercely competitive business. And then the conversation we had earlier about the competition, for people's leisure time, I mean, there are enormous challenges. We've got substantial upward pressure on salaries, on minimum wage across the United States, which is affecting a lot of my members' stores. In America, when the minimum wage goes up, every other retailer, they can just pass that on to the customer. When the quart of milk costs, if I have to pay my grocery store employees an extra $2 an hour, and I charge a quarter more for the quart of milk, the customer doesn't balk at buying the quart of milk. When I go to McDonald's and the hamburger is 50 cents more because I had to pay the employees an extra $1 an hour, you don't not go to McDonald's. We go out to dinner and go to a restaurant, you don't not buy the entree because it's $15 rather than $14. In our business, because the tradition is the publisher prints the suggested retail price on the products that every customer then sees. So when my minimum wage goes up, I can't put a surcharge. I can't charge another 50 cents for that book because I'm paying my employees more. I got to run my business more smartly. So that's enormously complicated. Most indie booksellers, I would certainly say, they want to pay their employees a living wage, but it's complicated in an environment where we can't have the same, we can't change our prices. Upward pressure on rent in the United States, occupancy costs, even though there has been a decline in the total number of square footage devoted to retail, prime retail in America, rents are continue to go up. So it's a tough business, but the good news is our members are entrepreneurial, younger, and are figuring out how to reinvent themselves. So we think it's a pretty upbeat, positive story, and we have every reason to be optimistic about the future.
Really good to hear, and thank you very much